up, fam? Welcome back to the Whoa, That's Good podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. You might be listening to this podcast after you just saw I had a baby. We are pre-recording this podcast, and we have to pre-record this one because me and who my guest is are both due within a week of each other, and that is why I wanted to have her on before I take off for the summer, because we are in the same season of life. But this girl is amazing, y'all. She is so cool. If you do not know who Mia Fields Donovan is, Mia Fields is an absolutely incredible songwriter, worship leader. If you haven't heard her name, I know you've heard her songs. She has written songs like Tremble, Chain Breaker, Nothing Else, Yes I Will, Beautiful Story, Age to Age, Peace Be Still, and The Dove. So she has been a part of writing songs that you probably have sang in your car or worshiped to in a church service. She's written so many more than that. Those are just to name a couple of the songs that she's written. She has a heart of gold, and she has faith that can truly move a mountain. I can't wait for you to hear about her story. We're going to talk about her journey for believing what God was going to do through her. We're going to talk about her journey of waiting on her husband and praying towards that, and also waiting and praying on a baby when in the natural it seemed like impossible that she was going to have a baby. And so I can't wait for you to hear the story. She's amazing. And without further ado, I'm so excited to have Mia on the podcast today. All righty. We'll just jump right in. Mia, I am so excited to have you on this podcast. I was just kind of telling you before you jumped on that I was thinking, who's going to be like the last podcast I do before maternity leave? And I got to thinking about us DMing because we're kind of in the same timeline with when we're going to have our babies. And I was like, you would be perfect. So thank you for saying yes while you're super pregnant, just like myself. We might be a little out of breath on this podcast, but we are here for it. So thanks for saying yes.
It's like proof that we're in the middle of our miracle season before out of breath.
That is the truth. I had one other girl on who was pregnant. Bethany Hamilton was on a couple weeks ago, and I could like hear it in her voice, and I was like, I'm really glad that I'm not the only one on this episode that's out of breath. So it's great.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so excited to talk to you about your story. For those who don't know Mia's story, I mean, there's so many layers to it that we're going to talk about, but I was telling you before, I remember years ago getting a Dropbox file sent to me from my friend saying, you have to listen to Mia Fields' story. And I was like, first of all, how do I even have this Dropbox? And little did I know, this Dropbox was like going viral, literally, which was so cool. I mean, so many of my friends had listened to this Dropbox so you get to hear the story about her meeting her husband. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about waiting on baby. I want to talk about songwriting. I want to talk about all. But first, I have to ask you the question that is the question of the Whoa, That's Good podcast. And that is, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given? Big question to start with.
It's a very big question to start with. I think the best piece of advice I've ever been given, you know, I'm a big faith person, and I'm a big believer that you dig your heels in faith and you contend for a promise. So the best piece of advice I've ever been given was you can't make anyone understand what God has told you. And I think like so often we want people to validate and align with the thing that God's told us, but it's called a faith journey for a reason. And sometimes it just does feel foolish. It does feel like I can't make anyone understand this. And often it's because it's between you and God and for you guys to walk it out together. So I think that's probably one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever been given, because it made me stop striving to have people understand what something that they couldn't, you know?
That's so good. And it's so cool. I love when people share their best piece of advice because you see how it's truly impacted them. And I was re-listening to that story this morning of just you and the process of waiting on your husband, and that piece of advice is carried through that entire story. I mean, if you didn't believe that in your heart, you probably would have never shared all of that story with the world.
Oh,
so
totally.
I love that. That's so cool. So a little bit about you that I think is really cool that maybe not everyone knows is you are a triplet, right? Which is epic.
I am. Yeah, I've got
That's so cool. So you're a triplet, and you kind of talk about when you were in high school or middle school being at the bottom of the food chain, which is hard to believe because you're so cool now. You've written all these songs, you know, you're crushing it. But bring us back to, you know, your younger years and what it was like and how you were believing that one day God would use you to write songs, but the evidence was not really on the horizon.
No, right. Yeah, I think It's tough, I think, growing up in like a Western culture, because we do look at like the most likely. And I was the least likely. Like it was like, at school it was the Jehovah's Witness kid who was one of my friends, then me, and then like everybody else, which is tough when like you have two sisters who look like you and sound like you, but the divide is just really big. They were quite popular at school and quite well liked, and I just for some reason wasn't. Probably because I played tuba, I don't know. But I, even being like someone who didn't have a lot of friends at school and wasn't, popular and wasn't very talented and kind of was average at everything, I had this thing in my heart where I would go to God and I would read that scripture that says many are called but few are chosen. And in my heart, I would be in agreement with that. And I would say, God, I'm one of the chosen ones. I'm one of the people that you're going to use to do something special. And I would go to school and I would think, nobody knows this, but God is going to use me to do something really special. And I think the power of agreement, even as a kid, sometimes I think we're waiting for people to prophesy over us or come and recognize the gifting or recognize the call of God in our life. But if you don't recognize it yourself, it doesn't matter how many prophetic words you get. Your agreement is so powerful and so important, and it's really coming into a partnership with God that says, hey, I'm willing to be used for whatever you want to use me for. So as a kid, I had this like, just real faith that God was going to use me for something special. And I would write these letters to God when I was a kid, like from when I was like 13 or 14, saying, one day I want to write songs that go all over the world for you. One day I want to tell people what you're like through songs. And the reason is I got saved in the Salvation Army when I was 5, because we had grown up in like the projects and we needed the food, So the Salvation Army would bring us food, but it wasn't someone teaching me stories about God. It was actually through the songs that I came to know God. So we would sing like, Jesus loves me, this I know, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. And those were the things that became my theology. So, what a crazy story that then God would, encounter me in that way, and like he would meet me in that way. And then he would say, okay, now I'm going to use you to help other people to encounter me in the same way. So, yeah, so I had this like thing as a kid that I was just convinced that God was going to use me for something special. And, it takes a lot of faith to stay convinced when you don't have any of the skill set. I always joke that my first songs were rap songs and they're terrible. So I think I'm proof that God can use anyone.
That's awesome. Were they legitimately rap songs?
Oh my gosh, yes, and they were terrible. Like, I didn't even listen to rap music when I was a kid, so I don't know why I started with rap songs of all things, but, I think I just thought I would have a go, and I really wasn't very good at any of it. But I think like God is so kind about anything that you steward really well, he will multiply. And stewarding it really well doesn't mean succeeding. Stewarding it really well means being faithful with what's in your hands. And I think there's a disconnect sometimes about like, if I'm succeeding and I'm recognized, then that's good stewardship. And I think no, good stewardship happens in the secret place, happens in the unseen.
Great.
So yeah, I just kind of stuck at it, and then it started to work out.
That's so good. Gosh, I love it so much. When you're telling me this story, it kind of reminds me of a little bit of The Princess Diaries. I don't know if you have seen that movie.
Oh,
okay, yes, Princess Mia. And she's like, doesn't have, what looks like she's going to need to be the princess. And she, opposite than you, though, doesn't have the confidence to believe that she should be the princess. And there was this moment in this movie that really spoke to me, because I was more like the person that I couldn't, like, you had all the faith in the world to believe it. I didn't have the faith to believe it. And I actually, someone spoke a word over me at Bethel of all places. I went with a friend to encourage her as she was doing a speaking thing. And this is before I was speaking or anything. And this girl kind of called me out, and she said, you need to step outside of your tent like Abraham, look up at the stars, and ask God for the faith to believe what he's going to do through you. And it was such a good word, because I never knew I could ask God for the faith. Like, I felt like if anything, God, I can give you faith, like you're doing everything else. Like, my job is to give faith, but actually I can ask you for faith. So I just began to ask God for faith. But going back to this movie scene moment with Princess Mia, she she doesn't think she should be princess. She's like, this is a nightmare. And her friend Lily are outside playing basketball. And she's like, oh, this is just a nightmare. And her friend Lily goes, a nightmare? She goes, really? She said, wanting to rock the world but having zit power, that's a nightmare. Because she was talking about herself. She just found out her show's only reaching 12 people, her cable show, all this stuff. And she said, you are a miracle. It's a miracle that you get to be a princess, that you actually have the power to affect change. That's a miracle. And I loved it. And I was sitting there watching it and kind of in this time where I felt God kind of calling me to do more than I believed I could do in my own strength. I was going to have to depend on his power within me. And I realized, like, it is a miracle that the God of the universe would call me by name, that I would get to partner with him in doing something that would ultimately result in other people getting to know him. And so I just remember that really speaking to me. But hearing your story, it's so cool because I love how you said, in the westernized culture, people like to choose who looks the most likely. But that is not what God does. I mean, even God said to, whenever he was going to anoint Samuel, like, man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. And here you are stewarding the gift that God put on your life before it was even really seen as the gift. It was rap music. And so it was not good, but it was stewarded well. So how did you go from rap music to writing songs that the whole church is singing? Like, kind of bridge the gap for us. What started that journey of actually writing songs for the church? Y'all, I know how it is. When you have a busy lifestyle, it can be really hard to stay healthy, especially when you're on the go. But that is why AG1 has been so huge for our family, because it just makes being healthy so much easier. You don't have to put your health on the back burner, and that's why we are an AG1 Athletic Greens family. Our world can get complicated at times, but AG1 is always so simple and easy. AG1 is just a single scoop that's packed with 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients, so you can replace so many different products and pills with just one serving. Christian tried it for the first time because he's all about healthy lifestyle and he loves trying products to help him meet his wellness goals. So he tried AG1 and he was hooked. He got his parents on it too, and now he even has friends of ours loving it. It's pretty awesome. Christian was immediately impressed by the taste as well as the boost AG1 gave him in energy, focus, stamina throughout the day, and also just recovery from some of his tough workouts. He also noticed improvement to his gut health, which is so important because gut health really affects our overall health, especially our mental health. AG1 by Athletic Greens fills nutritional gaps in your diet, so even if you're busy traveling on the go, you can always make sure that you have a good immune supporting boost of energy that AG1 will give. They also have travel packs, which I have right here, which make traveling so much simpler and easier. AG1 was designed with ease in mind so that you can live a healthy and better lifestyle without having to do a lot. Here's the travel pack, super cute. Throw in your backpack, get where you're going, and be healthy while you're doing it. Another thing that I love about Athletic Greens is their vitamin D3 plus K2 drops. I have it right here. If you're watching this, I keep my drops with me every day here at the office. I can just put it in my water or my food because taking vitamin D has helped me personally so much. It's helped my skin a lot. It also helps with the immune system, heart, and bones, and it's just so easy. Plus, there's 600 servings in this little thing, so this will last you a long time. If you're looking for an easier way to take supplements, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Just go to athleticgreens.com/whoa. That's athleticgreens.com/whoa and check it out today.
I think I just stuck at it. Like, I think there's, the Bible talks about how trials produce perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And there's something so powerful about just persevering, and so many people give up before it's time. And I love that, like, for me, like, I'm really not a story of having this amazing gift and then, just being in a field and playing my guitar and eventually someone figured it out and put me before a king. I'm really a story of, just little by little, step by step, faith by faith, just walking it out, and I think the kindness of God is that, he took me from this little town. I grew up in a really small town in Australia in northeast Victoria called Myrtleford, and it's just 3,600 people. And it's not like an American small town where there's still a Walmart and there's still a McDonald's and all that. No, there was none of that. It's like a really small town that like the closest McDonald's is like an hour away. So that's how like remote it was. But, you know, I love how God is like really interested in like plucking you out of obscurity and saying, if you want to walk this out with me, I have somewhere for you to go that's pretty powerful. So I ended up like moving actually to Sydney to go to the Hillsong College when I was 17. And I just started I'd been writing songs before I went, but I kept writing songs when I went. And I probably handed in about 70 songs before one of them even really made it through. And I think that's a really good journey. You know, it's a way harder journey for the very first thing you put your hand to work, because then there's so much pressure on you to deliver when you don't actually have the skill set to do it, and when you don't have the character to do it. You know, like I think it would have been a harder journey if the first thing I did was like super successful or like super well received, but instead it was just this like chipping away, you know, almost like building a like, I don't know, almost like carving out a sculpture, you know, where it took a lot of time. And like people forget, like, you know, I'm 40. I just turned 40 in January, and like I actually been doing this for like 21 years. Yeah. So it's not been a journey of like, you know, just having an overnight success. It's been a journey of just continuing to walk it out, continuing to persevere, continuing to just take every season as it comes. You know, there are definitely manifest seasons of God where it feels like, you know, you're hearing him very loudly and everything's working and everything feels like it's being well received. And then there's hidden seasons where it feels like, you know, it's a bit more silent and you have to dig in a little more, and, you know, it's maybe a bit quieter, you know, and I think that's actually really powerful to be able to do both of those seasons really well.
That's so good.
So, I went from like writing at Hillsong for like 10 years to then moving to the United States, becoming an American citizen, which I love,
awesome.
and just continuing to write songs here.
So cool. Gosh, I love that so much, because so many people do desire to be an overnight success, or they're, you know, 22 years old, just got out of college, and they're so frustrated that it hasn't happened for them yet. But I think you're so right. There's actually a good reason a lot of times why it hasn't happened yet, and what God's doing in those hidden times, what God's doing in that, you know, sacred space where you are just writing 70 songs and fleshing it out and getting to know God and getting to know yourself as you work with him on the skill set and the gifting that he's given you is so beneficial. My friend and I were talking about this the other day, because she's worked with me now for the past 6 years, and she helps run like everything with LO. And she was saying, you know, Sadie, like for a long time, I wanted to like have my dream job. And I was like, why am I not getting like my dream job? And I have all these other jobs. And she said, but I realized like if I had this job then when I wanted it, I wouldn't have even lasted here, because I wouldn't even know what to do. But because she had all these other jobs that strengthened her skill sets, that put tools in her toolbox, if you will, by the time she got on this team, she's brought LO to what it is today. I mean, we would not be doing half of what we're doing had she not come on our team and been able to bring this amazing years of hard work and years of knowledge that she gained from these other jobs. And so those times are they're so important, even if they don't seem big or like the dream. They're all leading towards where you're going. Every season is so intentional. And so it's cool to hear that in your story. And
I was just going to say, like, you know, just as an encouragement for anyone who is 21 or 22 or 18 or 25 and you feel like it hasn't happened for you yet, let me encourage you, God will be incredibly kind to you along the way. You know, I had my first song recorded when I was like 19 or 20. And, you know, it's like God will give you little kisses from heaven along the way to like encourage you to keep walking it out. And he will be incredibly kind to you along the way. So don't think it's going to be one of those things where you're hidden for like 20 years and then it'll all just happen at once. It's glory to glory and strength to strength. That's the whole story. So I don't want anyone to be discouraged that like you're just going to be in a holding pattern for like 20 years. I will say this, like I remember flying home to Australia once a couple of years ago, and you know, going to Australia it's an incredibly long flight, and you have to fly to LA and then you have to wait around, and then it's like 11 o'clock at night. So it's, you know, by the time you're on that plane, you're ready to just take off and get home. and take that 14-hour flight. But I remember getting on the plane one time and, you know, it had been such a long travel day and it's 11:30 at night and then they say, like, we can't take off because the wind is going in the wrong direction. So we have a bad headwind. And I remember sitting in that plane being so frustrated, being like, no, just take off. And we sat on the runway for an hour and a half and without taking off. And then all of a sudden the wind changed and the plane took off. We actually ended up getting to Australia in a quicker amount of time than what we would have gotten even if there was no headwind. So instead of it taking 14 hours, it only took 12 hours and 20 minutes or something like that. So we not only made up the time, but we got there quicker. And sometimes God is saying, I don't want you to get ahead of me. I don't want you to get ahead of the Holy Spirit, but wait for the wind to change because I'm going to actually accelerate the way you get there if you'll just wait on me. The holding pattern is not to delay you. It's actually to get you there quicker.
Great. That is so good. I'm so glad you said that. That's so good. And I think about whenever I started doing live events for LO whenever I was like 18, I think. And it was really funny because this past year we got to host our first conference and it was like very exciting. So, you know, we're posting it, we're talking about it and people are like, oh, this is so cool. You're starting this and all this stuff. Well, in the time that, you know, the conference was coming up, I got this throwback on my phone. You know how it'll be like 5 years ago from today or whatever. And it said 7 years ago from today. And 7 years ago from today was my first live event that we ever put on. And it was so funny because I was like, people think this is my first event to ever do because this is the one that's working, you know, in the sense of like, this is the one that looks exciting and people are actually showing up. 7 years ago when I had the first live events that we were doing, it looked a little bit different. We ended up having to cancel 2 events that we planned for because only 40 people bought tickets in a 3,000 seat arena. So it was like not as, you know, successful. But what God was doing in that time, again, like it wasn't about the success. It was about stewarding what God was doing. And now 7 years later, I'm able to step into these moments and I've seen God be God for all 7 years. I've had exciting moments within those times. Those dates and those tours that we did, even though it didn't look the same as it does today, they were still used by God. And I'm so grateful for that. So you're so right. It's not like you're going to wait, you know, 20 years, 7 years, 8, however long. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom. It's like, no, there's a process to the whole thing. And it's fun to ride. It's fun to ride the ride with God. It's fun to do those things. It's fun to look back and be like, okay, that was not successful, but man, did we learn so much. Man, what God did in that time was awesome. So I'm really glad you said that. One thing I've heard you say before when you were talking about your time at Hillsong and then leaving to come to America is that people were saying like, you know, you're at the top of the game. Why would you do anything else? Like this is the biggest it's ever going to be. And I think that sometimes we do have to fight that lie of believing that I've already done the biggest thing that I'm ever going to do in my life. And especially like for people out there listening, I mean, some people are 22 and still waiting on or working towards what God's ultimately going to do in a big way. But some people, especially in a social media culture, it's like you've hit your success moment. You've had the overnight success. You've had your viral moment. And it can be really easy to get wrapped up in the identity of what was and not keep going. And so for you, when people were saying stuff like that, what did you tell yourself in that time? What did you believe God was going to do or what was to come instead of getting wrapped up in what was? Friends, if you know me, you know I'm all about some good snacks, and right now I am really into dried fruit, especially mangoes, and I love trying new brands. I was so excited when a box from nuts.com showed up at my house, and their dried mangoes, I am not kidding, are seriously the best I have ever had. They are better than any other brand, and they are so fast. Like, I ran out of my pack because I ate it pretty fast, and I overnighted those things. They were here the next day. If you don't know what they're all about, nuts.com is your one-stop shop for freshly roasted nuts, dried fruit, sweets, pantry staples like specialty flours, and more. Their wide selection means there is something for everyone, and they have a seriously huge selection of snacks. They've got sweet and savory plus gluten-free, organic, and diet-friendly snacks. They even have everyday cooking essentials like herbs and sauces. Nuts.com has pretty much got you covered on all the things. I can't wait to check out some of the other stuff that they have at Nuts.com because all of it is so good. It's so cool that I can buy their products individually to try them out, or when I find something I really love, I can sign up for auto delivery so I never run out of my favorite things, like my dried mangoes, for example. I personally love dried fruits. This was great for me, but like I mentioned, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, we are big nut and chocolate fans, and they have all of those different things on their website too. I was looking just the other day and was like, wow, here's some of me and Christian's favorite things, and so excited to just get to dive in more to all the things that they have. Nuts.com is serious about quality too. They pop their corn and roast their nuts the same day they're shipped, so they're super fresh when you get it at your house, which is so awesome, and that makes a big difference. It sounds old-fashioned to do it that way, but they've been doing it the old-fashioned way since 1929, and it makes a big difference. If you're a business owner like me, Nuts.com even will sell directly to you, which you gotta love that kind of support. All this talk about snacks is definitely making me hungry. I'm gonna have to go get my mangoes, but right now, Nuts.com is offering new customers a free gift with purchase and free shipping on orders of $29 or more at nuts.com/whoa. So go check out all the delicious options at nuts.com/whoa. You'll receive a free gift and free shipping when you spend more than $29. Again, that's nuts.com/whoa to go check it out.
Well, I think there's two things. Number one, your obedience to God is so much more important than you're a people pleaser with man, and it does go back to that thing of you can't make anyone understand what God has told you, which doesn't mean you go and burn all your bridges. It means it's not what you do, it's how you do it, and I still even in a transition period, I think sometimes people really wrestle with well, God's told me this, so I'm just going to burn the ships and off I go. And I think sometimes you just have to wait and go, okay, what's your timing, God, and how do you want me to walk this out? So, for me, it was really important how I walked it out, not just what I did. But I had to go back to, God has said this, and I would much rather be in a partnership with him than in a partnership with any of the words that are being spoken over me. Is it scary to be I'm leaving this familiar, comfortable thing where if I stayed, it would be easy? Yes, that's incredibly, incredibly hard and incredibly uncomfortable. But, one of the ways we grow our faith and one of the ways we develop a track record with God is by giving him our yes and actually being prepared to walk it out no matter what it looks like. And so for me, I was I think I just got into a place where I just said, whatever this looks like, I'm prepared to do it. And I kind of had this thing of I'm going to go give it my best shot. And at the end of the day, even if it fails in the eyes of everybody else, I did what I thought God was telling me to do in faith. And the Bible says that without faith, it's impossible to please God. So my goal is to please God more than it is to please anybody else. More than it is to even succeed. I just want to please God.
Great.
And it's amazing how he will meet you in that, and he will meet you in you stepping out in faith. So I remember when I got to America, sitting in this empty apartment with a mattress on the floor, when I was 27 or 26 or 27. And I remember having this moment where I was watching our church service online and I just started crying my heart out, being what have I done? And I think everybody has those moments when, when you step out in faith and it doesn't, and you feel like you're sitting in the void and you feel like you're sitting in the unknown and this isn't how I thought it would look. And I think you have a choice in those moments to either look back and say, what have I done? I regret it all, and to long and grieve for the old season. Or you have a choice to look back and say, look what the Lord did, and so imagine what he's going to do.
That's great.
And I think you partner with God in that ingratitude. So I ended up driving down to FedEx and printing off all these photos of the last 10 years, and I put them on my walls of my apartment. And every time I would walk past those walls, I would have a reason to be grateful. And I would put my hands out and I would say, God, thank you so much that this is what you did in the last 10 years. And thank you that in the next 10, you're going to run circles around.
Wow.
And honestly, in 5 years, God ran circles around.
Come on.
And he doesn't even cut off the last 10 years. It all ends up going together and God brings it all full circle. I have as strong friendships as I did back then. And like even all the people that like I loved in Sydney, now they're in Nashville all the time. So how good is God?
That's awesome. That's so good. Gosh, I love that so much. And that leads perfectly into the story of you praying and believing for a husband, because it is a story of faith and partnering with God, and a story of collecting a lot of evidence. And so I cannot wait for you to share a little bit about this story. So like I mentioned, this story years ago kind of went viral through a Dropbox link, and then now it is up on the podcast from where you ended up speaking at the church. But for those who haven't heard your story, share a little bit about the process of praying for your husband.
Well, okay, so, you know, I think I'd seen God move in every single area of my life, like even like, you know, in like the things that were in my heart to do, in finance, in like my health, in friendships, in even moving overseas. I'd seen God move over and over and over again, but there was this one area where I had like believed God for this God orchestrated thing since I was like 16, you know? And, you know, everyone had told me like, well, you know, you just pick anyone and God will bless it. And, you know, I love that even God will speak into that for you, and God has a different story for everybody, you know? So I think for me, like I just had this thing where I really wanted God to partner with me on it, and I really wanted to just know that I know that it's Him, you know? But my experience had been like incredible disappointment. And, you know, I've said this over and over again, but if your filter is disappointment, then even if God wants to do something for you, you won't be able to see it, you know, and you won't even give Him the credit for it, even if He does do it. So for me, I had like kind of believed God, but the very first thing that He wanted to do was heal me of this deep disappointment so that I could actually have eyes to see what He wanted to do. So He kind of started doing a work in me about that. And then I remember having this moment where I'd said to Him, God, I'm going to keep trusting you, but I want to know what you're doing. And the crazy thing is that instead of finishing off like, you know, seasons where I'd be disappointed, like, oh, God didn't come through, I started finishing off seasons where I was like, well, it hasn't happened yet, but like fully expected. And I had this moment in church where I'd said to God, I want to know what you're doing. And I had this actual vision of a furniture warehouse. And in the furniture warehouse, God was standing beside me, and I looked out and there was all these one-off pieces of furniture, and God said to me, you can pick anything you want. Which, you know, that's such a like beautiful thing about God, is He's not putting limitations on us. And He's not saying like, well, you're this old, or, you know, you have like this social standing, or you have like whatever, or, you know, I think society can put like a lot of boxes around you. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of women who are like, you know, older, and like, you know, they've had friends make them believe these are your options. And I'm like, God just isn't out of options. So God's like, you go for it and you dream big. So He'd said, you can pick anything you want. And I remember in this vision walking around this furniture warehouse, looking at these amazing one-off pieces of furniture where nothing was the same, but still feeling like nothing here is for me, and not having a peace about it. And to be honest, that's how I'd felt about dating. And in the vision, I ended up going back to God and saying, I don't want to do this unless you do it with me. I don't want to choose unless you help me choose. And, you know, he's so tender. He like drew me into this embrace, and He said, you know, Mia, everything here is good. I'm actually the one that created all of it. And there are pieces here that are better for you than other pieces. But if you really want me to pick with you, I will custom make it for you.
So good.
And He said, but that means you'll be empty-handed for a little bit longer. Are you willing to do that? And I said, yes. And then the vision was over.
Wow.
And, you know, I think one of the most powerful things you can do in a season where you're believing for something is to go to God and ask Him for a promise. Because then you will have something to hold on to, and you will have something to contend for. And then it doesn't matter what else you're facing or what the horizon looks like. You will always be able to go back to this moment of like a but God moment, and you'll be able to look for evidence of what He's doing instead of what He's not doing.
Great.
And I think we do have like a bit of a wrestle with that, where like, you know, where we start to compare our season to other people's season. You know, I never want to be someone who, you know, in every season, if all my friends are getting married, rest assured I'm going to be on the front row cheering my face off, buying you the best gift. Because I'm not going to be someone who looks at somebody else's breakthrough or the thing that I'm believing for somebody else gets and take that as like, oh, God's ripping me off. Like, it's such a destructive mentality. it's actually, the word testimony, it means do it again. It's permission for you to, seeing people's testimonies, hearing people's testimonies, that is permission for you to say, God, look what you can do for them. So, I'm asking you to, come and do it in my life as well. Cool. So I kind of went on this journey with God for about 2 or 3 years where, people would say to me, when people try and set you up, but, their options for you are not as good as God's options.
Yep.
Where you're like, no, God doesn't lowball me, and so I'm not going to lowball myself. So I went on this journey with God where I would literally look for evidence. Instead of just waiting around, I got Bill Johnson has this thing that he says about waiting where he says it's not, we think of waiting as so passive, but it's actually incredibly active.
Good.
Resting in God is partnering with God and relaxing into what God's doing, but waiting, he says it's like twirling in the dance.
Oh, it's cool.
And it means that you have to lock eyes with your dance partner and just really focus and go where they're going, which I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful picture. So I began to look for evidence of what God was doing in a pretty practical way. And I don't think it's a formula for everyone. I think the whole point of a testimony is that you would dare to have your own story with God. But I mean, I was in Israel and I bought a wedding ring for a guy, which sounds it can sound incredibly cringy, but I'm well, be it unto you according to your faith,
yes.
So I did things like that. I did things I remember Chris Kane was preaching at church one night and she talked about the walls of Jericho and she said, what do you do when you've got your promise, but you hit a wall? And she goes, you have to march around the wall. And I was like, okay. So, God had spoken to me about I'm custom making you something. And then he had spoken and said, it's in the mail. So I felt like this thing was on the way, but I hadn't seen it. And so I remember after that message going home and walking around my mail building 7 times at midnight,
awesome.
Which sounds craziness, but I'm sometimes doing something in the natural that exercises your faith is so good because I can look back on those moments and I can say, I was so convinced that I did something in the natural that felt foolish, which is the whole substance of faith is that it does look foolish. But I remember walking around that building 7 times and, I'd love to tell you that an angel came down from heaven and had a thus saith the Lord moment, but that's just not what happened. But it's funny because I did it and I just said, God, thank you that it's on its way and thank you that I can march around this building 7 times and it might feel insignificant, but in the spirit it's so significant. And the funny thing was the next morning I got 2 messages. One was from Jen Johnson and one was from Brooke Fraser and they were both messages saying, hey, here's these dreams that we've had about you getting married, which is crazy, So I think it comes back to that thing I was saying before of God will give you little God winks along the way to get you to your destination. The way that he turns up in the desert before you get to the promise and he provides in the desert so that you will have something to sustain you all the way to the promised land. So long story short, I kind of just kept walking it out and people would say, we've got this thing or you should come to this or you should do this. And I would say no, God's custom making me a husband.
I love it.
Which sounds crazy, but then, you can have the seed of something and people won't get it. But when you have the fruit, they'll go, aha.
Come on.
And it's so powerful to declare things in faith before they've happened and to speak it out before it's happened because once it's clear for you and clear for everybody, there's something that's not as powerful about saying God is going to do this and then watching people going wow, look, God actually did this for this person.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so good. Gosh, the story is so amazing. Some of you guys know that we're building a new house right now and we're so excited about it. One thing that we just picked out was our new bed, but with the bed we had to have a mattress, and who doesn't love having something customized? My friends at Helix Sleep know exactly how that feels, and they want you to feel like you have a customized best sleep of your life every single night. Helix Sleep is a premium mattress brand that tailors mattresses to different types of sleepers and their preferences. They've got 14 unique models to fit whatever your needs are. They've got luxury, they've got kids models, models and even big and tall models. There are some tall people out there in my family for sure who definitely appreciate that little extra leg room. Helix will help you find the perfect mattress for you with their 2-minute sleep quiz. Just answer a few questions about your sleep habits and they'll tell you exactly which model works best for you. We were matched with a Helix Midnight mattress, which is not too soft and not too firm and has a cooling effect that Christian and I both love. And I'm a side sleeper, and let me tell you, it is amazing to wake up without aches and pains from tossing and turning during the night because they made a mattress perfect for us. Why would you sleep on a mattress made for anyone else? Helix will pick out one just for you, and your personalized mattress is shipped to your door, which might be the best part, totally free. The setup is quick and easy. All you have to do is literally take it out of the box. It is literally that simple. Helix knows there's no better